time. The most precious resource available to any Space Engineers player. A resource so potent that we are constantly finding new ways to preserve it. But no matter what, you're going to spend a lot of time doing anything of consequence in this game. And across all those hours, there are 3 things that will eat up the most time. Drilling, welding, and crafting. Today I'm going to show you a couple of ways that you can try to cut costs in that third instance by using event controllers to make an autocrafter. The basic principle is this. Event controller monitors cargo container, and then controls an assembler set to repeatedly craft. One way or another though, you need to ensure the products of the assembler get into the cargo container, so you then use a conveyor sorter, which complicates matters more than a little bit. So let's get started with the heavy-duty approach, shall we? For this, we are going to effectively sort every single block that is inside of our inventory. So we're going to grab a sorter here, and we're going to feed that directly into a designated cargo container. We're going to call this one Container Steel Plates, just to keep things simple. We're also going to have our sorter set to be sorter steel plates, so we can again identify it. We're going to set it to whitelist, and we're going to take our steel plates out of here. There we go. Set that to drain all. So now, anything that is on the other side of this conveyor will get sucked through into here, filling our container of steel plates. This is useful if you want to find all of the steel plates in your entire station or ship or whatnot, but that does of course pose the problem that you then can't use steel plates beyond back here, because they all get sucked here, and you can't go the other way through this. You can set up ways to do that, but generally speaking, you want to put everything important after this step for this particular approach. So, next we add our assembler, and this doesn't really need to be anything too special, it just needs to be connected to this line. Alright, fairly straightforward so far, and we'll chuck a cargo container there just to stick in some iron. So, we call this our assembler for steel plates, keeping everything neatly aligned. We're going to then go into here, set it to repeat, and we're going to put in steel plates. Obviously it doesn't have any iron right now, so it's not going to do anything. Last but certainly not least, we need our event controller, which we're going to call monitor for steel plates. And very simply, we need it to turn on our steel plate assembler whenever we are in our first condition, and turn it off whenever we are in the second condition. You can use a second event controller to kind of control it within a range. This is the absolute simplest way you could do this. So we're going to say equal or less than, let's say 5% inside of container steel plates. So as long as the inventory of container steel plates over here on the left is less than 5% of its capacity, this assembler will be turned on. Let's give it some fuel and see how it does. So as we can see, they are being crafted and they are being funneled through to reach container steel plates, which is now at 0.2 and climbing. Once it exceeds 5%, it will then turn off this assembler until such a time as this drops below 5% again. As I say, this is the heavy-duty approach, because it relies upon you sorting every single steel plate in the entire inventory in order to ensure that they're contained within this container, which can be advantageous in some occasions, but not necessarily in others. For instance, there are occasions, such as for ammunition, where you don't really care what the actual total amount is in your system, as long as it's at least a certain amount. So to that, I have a much simpler approach than this. So once again, we grab ourselves an assembler, And we grab ourselves a conveyor sorter, and we then have our cargo container right here. So we're going to call this one container interior plates, just to differentiate things. And much the same, this wants to be a drain all for our target item, in this case, interior plates. Right there. And of course, this wants to be assembler, interior plates, and it needs to be just set to repeatedly make interior plates. Okay, so once again, we have our conveyor, we have our event controller, and we just want to tell it if the contents of 1 is lower than X amount, in this case we'll say equal or less than 1%, inside of container interior plates, then select actions, interior plates, on and off. Very straightforward. This can then feed into your actual main inventory, and we just have to make sure that there is one little caveat, which is that at no point is anything interior plate allowed to come actually through here. So let's just add ourselves another curve, just because I have enough space here. There we go. And we want to just blacklist interior plates. There we go. The reason that we are doing that is because it means that the only interior plates that are accessible by this sorter are the ones that are being made by this assembler. So the only inventory it cares about is this one. The only place it can fill from is here. So we should be able to say everything else totally fine. So let's just hook this up once again. Stick our 63k iron in here. And off it goes until this reaches 1%. And again, this doesn't care how many interior plates are in the rest of the system after this point. You can hook this through together, link it all up happily, no concerns whatsoever. There we go. And it doesn't care. The reason that you have this sorter right there is because if a sorter is in a loop like this and it's not prevented by a sorter like that, then it will just continually try to grab, essentially through its own hind end, the interior plates to insert into its own mouth. Sort of foot-eating mouth kind of situation. So you want to have that kind of system so that it actually just maintains it statically, because otherwise it'll just keep flipping every now and then. As I say, that is best for occasions where you don't really care how much is in the entire system as long as it's above a minimum level. Whereas this is where you want to be maintaining the entire inventory of your entire system. Oh, and it looks like it just turned off. Nice. 261, and that is 55%. Very good. So that is an Autocrafter. It is very simple. You can do it with a single event controller if you wish, or two if you want to define a larger range. Personally, I like to say between 30 and 50%, so craft if it's less than 30, stop crafting if it's greater than 50. Now, as mentioned, there are pros and cons here. This lets you know that you are spending the absolute bare minimum amount of consumable materials to make your components. This, on the other hand, is best for when you don't much care about the actual unit cost, but you want to make sure that you definitely, absolutely have at least a certain amount. Good for ammunition, for instance. Whereas this is more beneficial for things like pricey crafting components like thrusters. The benefit here is that you spend a lot of the time doing your drilling and your welding away from your base, or you are running around doing various other things, and your base is, for the most part, just kind of sitting idle. By setting up an autocrafter like this, you can use that time to have your base just crafting up a backlog of the materials that you would otherwise be waiting to craft through a given assembler, one after the other to make a brand new block. These can be built and stacked together so that they take up the same amount of space inside of your base. It's not a huge amount of space, ultimately, depending on how many components exactly you want to actually automate. Personally, I recommend creating autocrafters for at least the components for most conveyors. They're the things that you'll be making a lot of under most circumstances, and once you've gotten those going, you can use it to expand your own autocrafter. All of this will save you a great deal of time, allowing you to do, well, whatever, I guess, when space engineers have actual time. But who knows? I'm not here to tell you how to play the game. I'm just here to tell you how to make it faster.